Hello, everyone, and welcome to part 2 of the vaccine controversy, where we try to have a respectful conversation about the COVID vaccines and other matters related to COVID and how they can affect the person. For those of you who did not see the first video, please go ahead and watch it again. But for a quick reminder, I am just speaking for myself here. I'm not representing any of the opinions of my employer or anybody else. These are just my ideas based on the research that I've done personally into COVID and the vaccines. The other thing that I want to say is that this series is a representation of some of the arguments that are made against the vaccine. And the reason I'm doing it is because I've seen a lot of pain and suffering and death as a result of COVID, and some of it can and could have been avoided or minimized by people taking the vaccine. So that doesn't make the vaccine just the panacea or all or none, or the best treatment out there, but it is, I believe, in my opinion, a good thing for people to use and take advantage of. And there are some objections that have held people back from using the vaccine. So I want to tackle them in a good way, in a respectful way, and not putting anybody's opinion down, but just engaging them logically and having a good discussion. So with that, let's see the objection number 2 to the vaccine. Objection number 1 was that can we trust the government, medical establishment, or the pharmaceutical industry? And then objection number 2 is it's not a big deal argument. By that, I mean that a lot of people from the beginning of the vaccine, of the epidemic or pandemic, have said about COVID, COVID is not a big deal. My chances of dying are low. I don't think I should worry about that. It's just like hyped up too much, and it's not really a problem for me. And they would use sometimes statistics as saying my chances of dying in a car crash are bigger than my chances of dying from COVID. So let's talk a little bit about that controversy, about that thinking. And first of all, I want to assure you that I'm going to discuss this with respect and listening to the opinions of everybody in a calm, measured, and rational way. So let's talk about the response to that. Number 1, the first response I would say is, you are conflating two things when you say my chances of dying from a car crash, but yet I still use the car every day so why should I worry about COVID itself, that I would take a vaccine as prevention for it? Well, you're conflating two things. One is the chance of an event happening, and 2 is the chance of a bad outcome happening as a result of that event. So let's kind of untangle those two. If you're driving your car, what is the chance of the event happening versus what are the chances of you dying if you got in a car crash? Because the two are not the same. The same can be said for any bad event, natural event or whatnot. So for example, I looked that up, I had to look it up for this video, is what are the chances of dying from lightning strike? It is actually 1 in 139,000. All right, that's lifetime chance. Okay, what are the chances of dying in a hurricane? It's 1 in 59,000 per lifetime. What are the chances of dying in a car crash? That's 1 in 107. Again, for your lifetime, per your lifetime. All right, well, in all of these events, there are two aspects here. One is, what are the chances of me being hit by lightning versus what are the chances of me dying if I got hit by lightning. And the two are not the same. In the case of lightning, yeah, there is a big chance of a person dying if they got directly hit by lightning. It's not 100%, but it's high. But the chances of them getting the event itself is low. For example, you're now in a place, in a room or some other location listening to this video or viewing it. You know, if the sky is without any clouds outside, the sun is shining, yeah, in general, you understand that there is a chance you could get hit by lightning, but that chance is extremely small at this point in time because there is nothing around you that would make this happen. But however, if something individually happened to you personally that changed that chance. So for example, you're swimming in the ocean and you see a thunderstorm, there is lightning happening on the water right now as you are swimming. Will you say, oh, well, my chances of dying of lightning lifetime is 1 in 139,000, and so I will continue to swim? Or, my chances in general are of dying of lightning is 1 in 139,000. So I will, I will wait until lightning happens outside and I'll hold a metal bar for some reason and go out and just run in the rain. I mean, that would probably not be a wise decision. Why? What makes it not a wise decision? Well, what happens is that the circumstances of life change the risk for you. So regardless of what 1 in 139,000 means in general, if the circumstances change it and now you are in the middle of a thunderstorm and lightning is happening around you, you don't really want to take chances of this event happening, because what will happen to you if you got hit by lightning is really bad. The chances of that event turning deadly is bad. Same thing for a hurricane. Now, when it comes to a car, here is, the thing is that you're managing risk, whether you know it or not. And that's my second point. You're managing the risk of riding the car because you basically have no choice but to ride a car. You have to travel to work, you drive every day. Fair enough. So the chances of the bad event happening to you, God forbid, of you being in a car crash, increases by the fact that you're using a car every day. But at the same time, you are minimizing that risk. You are doing a ton of stuff to minimize that risk. You're putting a seatbelt on, you're paying close attention when you drive, you have a driver's license, you have an insurance, a car insurance that will cover you in case of a mishap, and so on. So there is a ton of stuff that you are already doing. Now, you may not think of it much because everybody else is doing it, but these are steps to minimize risk. So in other ways, the vaccine can be thought of as also a step to minimize risk. Now, whether that risk is big enough for you or not, that's a different question, but I want you to think of it in those ways. It is not true that you're just going through life and whatever may happen, may happen. You are actively and always taking steps to reduce risk. Now, the third point is that I want to ask about the argument of my chances are of dying are less than my chances of dying while driving. Okay, well, is death the only bad thing that can happen to a person? Because if you get in a car crash, there is a ton of things that can affect you negatively, even if you don't die. I mean, you could get hurt, you could get, the car can be totaled, your car can suffer damage. There is a lot of stuff that can happen that is negative from a car crash. And in like manner, if you are affected by COVID, well, you may not die, but at the same time, it doesn't make it fun. And it still is dangerous for you to get COVID because you can get a lot of health consequences short term or long term. We still don't really know what COVID can do on the long run as you are affected by it. Particularly concerning to me is the prospect of long COVID, or people who have the infection and then feel sick and tired, scarring of the lungs, or having other issues that may be affecting their neurological system on the long run. There is a lot that we don't know yet how it can affect them in that negative way. So obviously all of that has to factor in, even if you don't have much in terms of risk factors. Now, number 4, since we mentioned this risk factor issue, is, as most people know by now, is that COVID doesn't affect everybody equally. It affects people who have more risk factors higher than others. So obviously, one of the arguments that was posted and promoted by people like Joe Rogan and other commentators is they say, well, if you're young and healthy, you don't really need to worry about the COVID, because you don't really need to take the vaccine, because you're not going to have a bad outcome. Well, it really depends. That argument really depends on what are the risk factors. All right. So yes, age is a big risk factor, right? But there are many other risk factors that are more subtle, less known, and that can predict a bad outcome with COVID, or increases the chances at least of a bad outcome. For example, obesity. I mean, overweight and obesity is extremely prevalent, and it does increase the risk of a bad outcome with COVID significantly. Now, there are only a few people, when you start taking away all the risk factors that can increase your risk, like age and overweight, obesity, diabetes, hypertension, smoking, asthma, COPD, chronic diseases like cancer, things of that nature. If you take out all of that, you're left with, like a 20-year-old, athlete who has no health issues, zero health issues. That's just a bit unlikely. I mean, the majority of the population is going to have some form of risk factor or another, versus not having any risk factors whatsoever at all. And one of the most prevalent one, as I mentioned, is overweight and obesity, which increases the risk significantly. So I urge you to think of it in those terms as well. Now, one comment before I finish talking about this argument about COVID is not a big deal. And obviously, the more time goes by, the less likely people are, I think, to use this argument, because they are seeing people around them getting now sick. And there isn't, I think now, a household who doesn't know somebody or is related to somebody or has a friend somewhere who was affected by COVID in a big negative way, as now the number of infections and number of hospitalizations is just soaring across the country. So I think that we need to keep an open mind about this and not really think that, okay, well, COVID is a made-up crisis, fake crisis. The reality of what's happening out there is, I believe, breaking through to everybody, and we just need to be aware of what's happening around us, rather than just hope that it is a simple thing. The last comment I wanted to make today before I end up this podcast is to say, okay, if you have that opinion that COVID is a minor thing or is not a big deal, and I wasn't able to convince you otherwise, well, at least the one thing that you should do logically to be consistent with yourself is you cannot have any theory about COVID that it anything else than it originated from nature. You know why? Because if you're thinking that, oh, COVID was made in a lab and leaked from a lab, and I'm not debating this theory at all. In fact, I think this theory has a lot of merit, and I can make a video about it if you want me to. If you ask in the comment section, I can make a video particularly about that. However, if you think that COVID is not a big deal, then you cannot concurrent at the same time hold that idea that COVID was manufactured in a lab. Why? Because something that is manufactured, modified virus in a lab is something really dangerous. You can't have a modified virus in a lab, whether it was leaked or released intentionally or whatever thoughts you may have about it, and then go ahead and say whether it's not a big deal. I mean, how can a supposedly biological weapon not be a big deal? How can a weapon of mass destruction, if that's what you think about COVID and its origin, how can that be not a big deal? You can have one or the two of the opinions. You cannot hold both in your mind at the same time. You either say that COVID is really nothing, it just evolved, came from nature, who cares, it's just like a virus, like common cold, or you can say it was made in a lab and released intentionally or unintentionally leaked. But you cannot say both because it doesn't add up, it doesn't make sense. You cannot have a biological weapon that is not a big deal. And I hope that kind of just helps you think about perhaps this argument in a new light or in a different way. And until we meet in the next episode, be well and be safe. Thank you.